These infamous artificial islands are located between Malaysia and Singapore. Now, you may be wondering what's so special about them. Well, simply put, they were built with the intention of attracting over 500,000 potential residents. Despite the enormous size and scope of this insane mega-project, which, sure, was built with creativity, courage, and greatness, it appears that it hardly attracts anybody, and struggles to get new dwellers. If you look closer at these satellite images of Iskandar Puteri, Johor, in Malaysia, you can notice that this area looks like a ghost town. And it is. You'll be shocked to see a vacancy rate of 99.7%. That's right, there are barely 9,000 people living here. Okay, but why is that? After all, who wouldn't like to live in the green, eco-friendly modern city of dreams, near the wonderful Singapore, and at the picturesque seaside? Let me tell you the story of this mega-project called the Forest City. First, let's get to know the history of the project. However, if you are more interested in the reason for the fall of the Forest City, I suggest you skip to the chapter where we covered this topic precisely. Now let's get back to history. Okay, so we know that the city is almost empty at the moment, which is a stark contrast to the bustling vision unveiled in 2016. It was back then that Malaysia announced the creation of the Forest City, a $100 billion project envisioned as a futuristic metropolis for 700,000 residents. Part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the Forest City was touted as the Shenzhen of Southeast Asia, with reference to its proximity to Singapore, as Shenzhen is to Hong Kong. Announced in 2006, it was a joint venture between Chinese developer Country Garden Group and the Malaysian government-backed EDSB. At first, it was like a dream come true, because the planners wanted to blend nature and technology in a way that hadn't been seen before. But what do you do when things end up in the wrong hands? Unfortunately, this is what happened here. In 2016, the project was officiated by disgraced ex-Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, infamous for his involvement in the 1MDB corruption scandal. Yet, Malaysia forged ahead, taking a leap of faith. Personally, I think it wasn't the wisest move, but back then, there seemed to be no other option but to dive in and see where it led. So, the Forest City's idea was nothing ever seen like before. A development comprising 4 man-made islands, each of which was 4 times larger than New York City's Central Park. But people were hooked because of something else. It was all about the vision. Like, how often do you find crafting a futuristic city that seamlessly blends eco-friendliness and cutting-edge technology, featuring everything from residences and offices to parks, hotels, malls, and even a school, all surrounded by lush greenery? When people saw the plan, they would ask, was Forest City's main appeal its affordable seafront properties, compared to the high costs in cities like Shanghai? And the answer would be, yes, indeed. But even more promising to hear was that the project aimed to draw in a substantial investment of 170 billion Malaysian ringgit over the course of 20 to 30 years. Quite a boost to the economy. That would help them a lot, don't you think? But what looked promising on paper has turned out to be quite the opposite in reality. Today, Forest City's streets are empty, with unoccupied apartment complexes and abandoned commercial units. The busiest spot in the development is a duty-free shop, where you would find some 100 curious Malays buying alcohol. But before we point fingers at Malaysia, is there someone else who's more responsible? The downturn of Forest City's fortunes began with the collapse of its initial strong sales from China in 2017. This collapse came as a result of currency controls implemented by China's leader Xi Jinping, putting a cap of 50,000 annual housing purchases for Chinese buyers abroad. These controls hit Forest City hard, since its target buyers were wealthy middle-class Chinese seeking overseas investment opportunities. Now, even if there were loopholes, Chinese buyers would have faced challenges due to Malaysia's highly respected Muhhamad. In May of 2018, Mahathir was re-elected as Malaysia's Prime Minister after a previous 22-year term. He returned from retirement with a mission to address issues like alleged corruption linked to the 1MDB scandal. His election campaign included criticism of Chinese investments in Malaysia. Mahathir expressed concerns about Forest City, and thus the Forest City was specifically identified as a threat to national sovereignty. Mahathir announced a ban on foreigners buying properties in Forest City and denied them visas to live there. This decision stirred turmoil within Malaysia. While Johor officials welcomed the development, with the Sultan of Johor having a significant stake in it, there were disagreements within the government. Malaysia also tightened conditions for its Malaysia My Second Home program, popular among retirees and expats seeking homes in the country. This marked the end of Forest City's ambitions. But nature soon followed suit in tarnishing this once promising paradise on Earth. While Forest City attracts buyers with its beautiful shoreline and affordable oceanfront properties, it has raised concerns among ecologists. The project's massive 1,370 hectares of land have come at a non-monetary cost, leading to the destruction of biodiverse seagrass meadows and mangrove forests. Some say the project has negatively impacted the local fishing community by increasing shallow waters and causing environmental and acoustic pollution, resulting in the loss of marine species. And on top of that, Forest City's construction on reclaimed land involved dumping millions of cubic meters of sand into the ocean, leading to unstable soil and cracks in buildings and roads. The project's rosy vision wasn't without its thorns. Malaysian environmentalists also raised concerns about the impact on water quality due to increased sediment and shifting sands caused by the land reclamation. This, in turn, has had a demonstrably negative effect on local fishing communities. Fishermen are now forced to venture further into dangerous waters to maintain their livelihoods. A consequence that a mere $25 million compensation package for 250 fishermen, as offered by Country Garden Group, does little to address, according to environmental critics. Another big mistake was Forest City relying heavily on wealthy Chinese investors. When Malaysia's relationship with China got rocky, this source of money dried up. Now, in a last-ditch effort to avoid big losses, Forest City is trying to sell to locals. However, their condos cost around $1.4 million, way too much for most locals who can only afford the average JB property, priced at $135,000. Forest City's fancy buildings clash with what local folks can afford, so they're now trying to sell to rich people in JB and Singapore. Many people from JB commute daily to work in Singapore, kind of like how people from New Jersey commute to New York City. There's also a lot of back and forth between people in Malaysia and Singapore, which means there's plenty of Singaporean money floating around. But Forest City's plan to sell to Chinese buyers backfired. Now they're left with too many unsold properties and a reputation for being empty. As the Chinese long for affordable homes beyond their borders, and locals yearn for an escape from this nightmare, the scene is set for an intense story. In the middle of this unfolding drama, neighboring Johor and Singapore eagerly await improved conditions. The RTS link, a rapid transit system linking JB and Singapore, is set to open in 2026. Currently, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is working to improve the area by introducing a special financial zone in Forest City. This includes perks like multiple entry visas and preferential income tax rates. In October of last year, he teamed up with Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to announce a privileged economic zone for Johor, Singapore. Despite these efforts, Forest City's future remains uncertain. Property developers in China are struggling with increasing debt during a housing crisis, which adds to the challenges faced by Forest City. Maybe, with a bit of luck, this eerie town could come back to life. Until then, Forest City's sales reps persist in selling a perfect dream that only exists on paper rather than in reality. Now, what do you think when it comes to Forest City? How would you address these challenges? Also, let us know in the comments what video you would like to see in the future. See you then.